Hi, I'm Sharon Sobel. This is my model, Dennis Stessman. We are in the makeup studio of the Weber Fine Arts Building at University of Nebraska at Omaha. In today's tutorial, we'll be demonstrating makeup techniques for manipulating the bone structure to make the face appear longer and thinner. Now, Dennis has washed his face already, he's applied moisturizer, and he's very kindly shaved his beard for this. I've washed my hands in antibacterial soap. It's very important when you're applying your makeup or anyone else's that your hands are clean. Also, remember that if you have acne or any skin allergies, you need to talk to a dermatologist before applying any kind of makeup. We're going to start by applying highlight and shadow to Dennis's forehead. Now, when we apply the highlight and shadow on the forehead for a basic corrective makeup, we usually will apply a swath of highlight across both of the ridges, and we stop at about the center of the eyebrow. Because we want to make Dennis's forehead look much thinner, instead of extending the highlight all the way out, we're going to do a much shorter line. Also, to make his forehead look thinner, we want to make it look higher. So I'm going to apply highlight very close to his hairline. So I'm starting with the highlight, and again, not right above the center of the eye, but a little bit further in. I'm going to apply a sort of a bow or almost seagull shape right at the top, very close to his hairline. We're going to leave a lot of space in between, and I'm going to apply a swath of highlight on the lower brow bone. You can already see how narrow this makes his forehead look. Now I'm going to clean off my brush. You always want to clean off your brush between highlight and shadow. You don't want to mix the two. I'm going to pick up a little shadow color, and I'm going to shadow in between the two ridges of highlight. I don't want to get too dark. I want to have just enough that you can see it. You'll also notice that I'm leaving room in between the highlight and shadow. There's some foundation showing in between. That's, again, because we don't want to mix the highlight and shadow. Because the lines on the forehead are so short, this leaves us a lot of room on the temple for shadowing. Ordinarily, we would start the shadow here and move outward, but we are going to start it quite a bit further in. When you apply shadow on either side of the forehead, it almost squeezes the forehead in. And I'm applying it in a vertical manner on this side of his forehead, and I'm going to spin him around a little bit so you can see. And now I'm going to apply on the other side of the forehead. And we go right down to the hairline. Now, even though we're going all the way to the hairline to where the sideburn is, you don't want to put shadow onto the cheekbone. We want to leave some room on the cheekbone for later. So here we have the highlight and shadow on his forehead. I'm going to clean off my brush because I've just had shadow on it. And I'm going to start blending the highlight. I like to do the highlight first. That's just a personal preference. So I'm blending the top edge of the highlight. I'm going to try to leave as much of the highlight in the center of the swath, and then I'm going to blend the lower edge. So that way we have the brightest part of the highlight right in the center, and then it fades down to medium skin tone as you get to the edges. We'll do the same with this lower highlight. So as you can see, we're blending this highlight, so it goes from very bright to less bright towards closer to a skin tone. So now we've got the highlight blended. I'm going to clean off my brush again and blend the shadow. Once again, I want to reiterate that as we talk about blending, we're really blending the outer edges of the swath of makeup. We're trying to keep the inner part as bright or as full of makeup as possible. So you can see it's a little darker in the middle here, and then it blends out towards skin tone as we get to this upper and lower edge. We can now blend the temple. And we can see on this side how we're blending. And if for some reason you end up blending it onto your cheekbone, just use your sponge like an eraser and remove what you have there. I'm going to spin Dennis a little bit. And we're going to blend the shadow on this side. Now, if you find that you have accidentally blended a little shadow and highlight together, again, just use your sponge as an eraser. Now, I'm finding by looking at Dennis, it looks a little dark over here in his shadow area in the valley between the ridges. So I'm just going to, again, use my sponge, pull a little of the makeup off, and try to have a much more gradual blend. And here we have highlight and shadow to make the forehead look thinner. Next, we're going to work on the cheekbones. I'm going to turn Dennis just a little bit so you can see his cheekbones a little bit better. Now, if I were going to do a regular corrective makeup on Dennis, I would apply his highlight right here on the outer part of the cheekbone. I want his face to look a little higher, or his cheekbones to look a little bit higher. So I'm actually going to apply the highlight slightly above the normal placement. And the highlight on the cheekbone should not extend beyond the corner of the eye. This is a pretty good guideline for when you're applying your highlight. And it's at a slight angle. You'll notice that I began applying right at the hairline. I brushed away from the hairline. I lifted my brush as I applied it, and that helps to blend it out. I'll clean off my brush, and now we'll apply some shadow. Now, ordinarily, the shadow would go in the most deep depression of the cheek. I'm going to raise it up a little bit to match the height of the highlight. I'm also going to try to keep it relatively close because that's going to help the cheekbone look a little pointier and bonier and more thin. Okay, so now I'm going to clean off my brush. We're going to blend the highlight, and this is a very tight area of foundation in between, so we have to be very careful with blending. I'm going to blend that top edge of the shadow very quickly, and then blend the lower edge. One thing that you can do to really make the cheek look sunken in is you can bring this shadow down a little bit to a curve. Another thing you can do to make the cheekbone look very sunken in is to just get a little bit more down in the really deepest part where the molars would be, and really just lightly blend that out. Okay, right now it looks a little bit like a hard edge. I don't think I left enough of my base tone in between, so I'm going to just carefully and lightly pull some makeup away with my sponge and blend out this shadow. And here we have a high cheekbone that looks a little bit sunken in. During a brief break, I'm going to highlight Dennis's other cheek. The next thing we're going to do is work on making Dennis's nose appear thinner and longer. As you make things appear longer, they will also look thinner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my narrower brush and take up some highlight, and I'm going to apply highlight down his nose. I'm going to start the nose highlight right up at the lower ridge of the forehead. And we're going to brush the makeup down the nose. Now, ordinarily, if we were doing just a general basic corrective makeup, we would probably stop right about there at the natural end of the nose, but because I want to elongate it, we're going to extend it down over the end of the nose. And what we might also do is you can create a little point or angle, and that will give it a sort of pointy quality. And we're going to bring the highlight right up here onto the lower ridge of the forehead. After applying the highlight, we'll apply our shadow. And ordinarily, we would apply the shadow around here on the nose, but because the highlight is so thin, we're going to be able to bring the shadow in quite far. Now, ordinarily, when we do a contouring of the nose, we'll curve around the nair, and we'll still do that, but what we're going to do is extend the front part of that shadow to support and frame the highlight. So now we've got our shadow on this side of the nose, and again framing the nair, and we're creating that triangle of shadow around the nose. I'm going to turn Dennis so I can work on the other side of the nose, and you can see how once again I'm going to work down the side of the nose around the nair, but bringing the front of that shadow right down next to the tip of the nose. Another technique you can use to lengthen the nose is to really bring that shadow up into the eyebrow area. That will support the highlight on the center of the nose and really lengthen it. Now, this is especially helpful in a larger theater space. So now that we've got Dennis's shadow applied, we're going to blend out the highlight, which I'll do first on this side. And I'll turn him so you can see. And now on this side. And this is a very close blend. You've got the highlight and shadow very close to each other. So we're going to be extremely careful. And we do have our sponge. We can always pull off a little makeup with the sponge if we get too close. So here I'm blending that inner part of the shadow, and now I'm blending the outer part around the nair. And like I did on the other side, I'm going to bring a little of the shadow up into the eyebrow area to support and intensify the highlight on the bridge of the nose. I think I'll use my sponge just to make sure I've got a little bit of base tone here. And let's try it on the other side. I'll turn Dennis and we'll finish blending the shadow around the highlight on the nose. And now that I can look at Dennis straight on, I can see that my highlight wasn't quite symmetrical, so I'm going to repair that. And since you'll be working in front of the mirror, it'll be easy for you to find the center of the nose. Okay, and since I've done that, I think I need to bring in just a little bit more shadow to repair my repair work, as it were. And I'm going to turn Dennis here. And one last thing that you can do to really accentuate the pointiness of the nose is right next to that little angle that you created, you can pop in a little bit of shadow to really emphasize it. The shadow often will support the highlight that you put on. They really work together. So we have this little dark shadow here supporting the angle of highlight. And here we have a long and narrow nose on Dennis. I'm now going to work on Dennis's jawline. One thing we want to do to the jawline is to accentuate it and make it look bony. Now, Dennis has a very strong jawline already, but one other thing we can do if we want to make his face look a lot thinner is actually create a false jawline just slightly in front of where it naturally goes. As you can see, his face is somewhat squared off. We can really push the face inward and make it very skinny by changing the placement of the jawline. So what I'm going to do is, instead of painting in his jawline right in front of the ear and turning the corner here, I'm going to move in a little bit and do it right below his sideburn and create a jawline right here. So I'm applying the highlight, I'm turning a corner, making a sharp angle. I'm going to clean off my brush. And I'm going to support that highlight with a little bit of shadow. Now the shadow is going to go right behind the highlight in front of the ear. You can already see how that shadow is making the highlight stand out more. We're going to shadow under the jawline as we would normally do. And again, if you have trouble applying the shadow under your jawline, sometimes my students will have a friend help them with that, or at least tell them if their shadow under their jawline is looking messy or unblended. So I'm going to clean off my brush again. I'm blending the inner edge of the highlight onto his face. And I'm going to carefully blend the lower edge down to foundation tone. And now I'm going to clean my brush and blend the shadow under the jawline. So you can start to see that his face looks a little bit narrower on this side rather than on this side. So we're going to take a break, and I'm going to finish putting highlight and shadow on Dennis's other side, and then we'll move on to the chin. Now that we're finished with the jawline, we're going to move on to the chin. We want to make the chin look long and pointy to help elongate the face. So using highlight, instead of putting a dot on the chin, which we would do for a regular rounded chin, we're going to put a sort of little triangular shape and bring it as far down onto the under chin as possible. Next, with a clean brush, we're going to support that highlight with some shadow. And if you run into any of your highlight from before, just feel free to bring it back a little bit off the chin using your sponge. Now I'm going to clean off my brush and blend the highlight and blend the shadow. And I think I am going to add just a little bit more highlight to really create a nice symmetrical pointy chin. And here is Dennis's pointy angled chin. The last feature we're going to work on to make look thinner are the lips. Now the lips are different than the rest of the face. They're not obviously bone, so you're not trying to make the lips look thinner to make somebody look like they've lost a lot of weight, but you might have a character that you choose to have thin lips, and so this is a good technique to use. The first thing we're going to do is use highlight to block out the natural shape of the lips. So I'm going to follow Dennis's lower lip, and actually I'm working within his natural lip line, and I'm using a highlight, and I'm using a medium-sized brush, and I am lining his lips as though I were going to actually paint them with lipstick. I'm painting or outlining his lip with this highlight, and I'm going to blend it down to skin tone. Now we'll go over this with his natural base in just a minute, but you can see already how much thinner his lips look, that the natural red is coming through, and they look much thinner. We're going to do the same thing. He has these natural points on the top of his lip, and we're going to paint those out using highlight. And we're going to keep a sharp edge to the inside of the lip. And we're going to blend the highlight out as much as we can to his natural foundation color. Now we're going to take some natural lip color and paint the inside of his lips. So if you would open your mouth and tighten your lips. There we go. We're going to paint a natural lip color. We're going to stay within the lines of the highlight that we painted on. We're going to do the top lip now. And I want to make sure that I still have a sort of a natural bow shape on the top, even though it's a lot lower. And you can relax your mouth now, and you can see that his lips look a lot narrower. Now we can still see the highlight around them, so what I'm going to do is grab some of Dennis's base color, and we're going to paint in a little bit of his natural foundation color on top of the highlight. And this will bring the skin tone back to his natural foundation. We'll do it both on the bottom and on the top. And it's okay if just a little bit of that highlight stays through. And now that we've painted on the foundation, we see a very narrow lip line on Dennis's face.